my friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined today by our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy, the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. We're going to chat with him about some of these mid-major teams, some of these teams that are under the radar and he feels might be in for a good season. We're going to be diving in on some conference realignment as well. The new United Conference, the new look Mountain West, the new look Pac-12, how to be able to gauge those conferences because we've got a lot of new rivalries out there. Some renewed rivalries, like for the new look Pac-12, obviously they bring in pretty much like half the Mountain West, so you're still going to have a few out there, but we're going to be talking about the dynamic of that, some of these teams that are returning players, and just how much gold we need to be sticking into these mid-major programs that are bringing back a lot from a season ago. So we're going to have a great chat there with Rob. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lord CM, naming does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And yes, I beg of you, I plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. It lets me know what you want to hear on this podcast and makes the offseason go by a little bit faster because we still have a long ways away until college basketball games are back in our lives. And we really are running out of news and notes in college basketball. We're seeing a few international signings. We're seeing a few guys from the junior college ranks, what have you, get added to these rosters. But really, the transfer portal has died down. The NBA draft decisions, they're all in the books. So now we're able to get down to brass tacks, preview more of these teams, as you're going to get a conference preview podcast for all 32 conferences. We're already through 3, and a man that joined me for the Big Sky conference preview is a man that's on right now, Rob Donaldson. Again, he does such great work with his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, with the show Rob's Best Bets. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. I always love talking college hoops with you this time of year, especially because we're getting close, man. I mean, close is relative, I suppose, but we've made it through kind of the bulk part, 3 months since the last game has been played. And so ultimately, I'm looking at that as a major win, and I'm so excited to be talking ball with you today.
Absolutely. Rob, we are through the NBA draft decisions. We've gotten much of what we've seen here in the offseason all in the books. And just how do you try to take a look at these mid-major teams? Because many of them do get poached in the transfer portal. Many of them are going to have a lot of moving parts. And I think that's so interesting to be able to try to gauge these teams because they can be some of your most profitable when the season comes along.
100%. And nowadays, unfortunately, what's happened is not only has the poaching increased year over year over year of the players, well, now we're seeing the coaches who kind of felt stuck at those mid-major levels where in the past they felt like, hey, even though I might not compete for national championships, we can compete for something special here, kind of notoriety or a platform to maybe potentially make the Sweet 16. We just saw a guy in my neck of the woods with Ben Jacobson from Northern Iowa jump ship to Utah State. And this is a guy that was an elder statesman in Northern Iowa. Nobody, I think, ever thought that he would leave. But eventually it comes to a point where competitors want to compete. And if they don't feel like they have the talent accrual to do so, they're going to go somewhere where they can because there's still a lot left in the tank for these guys. So, yeah, kind of to your point, I think more than ever, you got to be dialed in on the coaching front along with the player front. And that just makes the sport harder to handicap, but also it opens the door for a lot of opportunity to take advantage of some of these unknowns as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's going to be interesting because you bring up unknowns. I mentioned this with our good friend Rocco Miller a few days ago, and I'll bring it up for you. How do you take a look at this United Conference where there really are no rivalries? It's a mashup of the Atlantic Sun and the WAC, essentially, with a few other mix-and-match teams that are going to be in there. That, I think, is a conference of a whole, and you got a lot of unknown with regards to so many of those teams, and one team in Little Rock that I'm actually really high on this season.
Yeah, I think it's great, right? Because it almost operates as like a clean slate for a lot of the trends that we like to fall in love with. And honestly, I think trends in large part for college basketball get people in trouble on the betting front because it's easy to latch on to a certain coach and the way things have always been for the past decade. and ignore the fact that this sport has changed tenfold over the last decade. And so I think, again, it serves a benefit to kind of the novice better, or maybe somebody who hasn't kind of refreshed, looked at the game in a different way. And ultimately, you kind of nailed it with all the conference realignment, conference creation. If you're the Pac-12 or the United League, you tend to think that there's a lot of opportunity to go out there and make some money based on what we know as, hey, a coach is this, a player is this, a system is this. And, especially at that mid-major level where a lot of the publicity and the eyeballs aren't necessarily on those teams, that's where I'm excited every single time I see a name that I know at those levels, because I know where to capitalize.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And Travis Fort going on over to Little Rock is so intriguing. And are there a few coaching hires, maybe at the mid-major ranks, that you look at and you're feeling bullish about? Because I know that for Travis Fort, he's had a couple less than savory stops. I just feel like with this Little Rock program, he's going to be able to get things turned around. That's one that I really like. We talked a little bit on this podcast last week about the Big Sky, and with Weber State, I think that that's a team that's going to be relatively competitive as well. Are there just a few teams in general that maybe have a little bit of a new coach that might not be one of these power conference teams? Because I think that's easy to say. Providence is probably going to be a whole lot better this year under Brian Hodgson, but are there maybe some coaching hires that have gone a little bit under the radar that you're feeling good about for this upcoming season?
There are so many, Greg, and I won't point to Murray over at Boston College. They're not a mid-major yet. They play like it, but they're not quite that yet. But I think ultimately this season, I don't know how clued in people have been to the coaching front. You mentioned Travis Ford randomly going back to Little Rock. That felt like a weird out of nowhere move. Well, what if I threw at you that Mark Turgeon is coaching the UMKC Kangaroos this next season? I mean, of all the coaching hires in the past decade, that might be the one that I look at like, who went where and what? Shout out, 4-win team brought in a guy from Maryland who I thought unfairly got run out. He was great there. He's a winner. He's a proven winner, and he's a proven player development guy and recruiter. We will see what happens. Obviously, he's been out of the game for a little bit in terms of the coaching front. We'll see what happens with him moving forward. But ultimately, outside of UMKC, the Charlotte 49ers went out and got Wes Miller from Cincy. Sometimes that reset of a coach maybe kind of failing at a high major program and then reverting back down a little bit ends up being the spark to kind of get things going again. And obviously, he's from North Carolina with UNCG. He had so much success there. I really like that hire. And then the third one that comes to mind for me immediately is I tend to think that Chris Mack at Charleston the last couple of years showcased a coach with so many resources who wasn't really that great of a coach. And so when they bring in a guy like a John Gross, who I truly believe is an elite level coach in this space, and you give him these ample resources at a program like Charleston, man, oh man, could Charleston be one of those teams like the High Point we saw last year where they shake up the NCAA tournament, have a chance to make the Sweet 16. I tend to think Charleston and John Gross are going to be a team to watch right from the gate and the rest of the way this next upcoming season here.
Yep, I'm right there with you. With Mark Turgeon going on over to UMKC, like, wow, that is very random to say the least. And they've been out there in the Summit League for a very long time, and that just feels like a conference in general that is undergoing a little bit of change, because I believe that St. Thomas is now out of the conference as well, so that's another team that's out of there. As we know, Omaha 2 seasons ago, they were able to make the NCAA tournament. How do you take a look at things? Because for South Dakota State, they underwent a coaching change 2 off seasons ago, and it feels like there's a lot of moving parts in a conference where we both know it's all about 3-point shooting and absolutely no defense whatsoever.
The conference, a lot of different coaches, players, and just different vibes have come into this league over the year, and the Summit League is still the Summit League, and I really appreciate the Summit League for that reason. Now, when you are looking at kind of the overall hierarchy of the Summit League, a lot has changed, right? Because South Dakota State has obviously kind of seen a new era start here this past season with Brian Peterson. We'll see where that takes us. Even a team like a St. Thomas has kind of emerged into the fold as a coach, and just a program that feels very, very steady with John Tower, and just ultimately what they're potentially able to accomplish at this level now that they've come up from Division II. And so I think ultimately when you're looking at the hierarchy of this league, it's North Dakota State, it's St. Thomas, and I don't know if necessarily any of that's going to change. Now, again, when you introduce a coach like it to Mark Turgeon and UMKC, and the bottom team in the entire league gets potentially gets the most accomplished coach out of all of them, what does that do? Does that make it more fun? I tend to think so. I'm excited here talking about it. So yeah, when you're looking at the Summit League this upcoming year, don't forget about an Omaha, right? Don't forget about North Dakota, who's gotten better year over year. I think there's a lot of excitement in this league right now, and potentially for the first time in a while, we might see a switch up just because of the level of coaching that exists in this league currently.
Yes, I'm right there with you. And man, this is going to be a very interesting conference because as we know, Oral Roberts, they've been through a few coaching changes as well. They're looking to be able to get back online. So that's a conference that very much catches my eye as Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I want to, on the flip side with Rob, talk about just the importance of being able to maintain players, being able to maintain talent, and having camaraderie for a lot of these mid-major teams. And I want to take a look at those new look, shall we say, West Coast conferences. Like, we're going to be seeing the Pac-12 for the first time. We're going to be seeing a lot of teams that are mix and match out there in the Mountain West and so much more. We'll chat about that with Rob on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VC Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson. Does such great work over at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson with the show Rob's Best Bets. He's over on Underdog Fantasy. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And we've taken a look at a few mid-major conferences already. We just dove in on the Summit League before we hit the break. Now let's take a look at just a little bit more of a broad brush and a little bit more of just a more broad topic in terms of the importance of retention when it comes to these mid-major teams. Like a conference that we both love, the Missouri Valley Conference, we've got quite a few teams that are bringing back a lot of what they had last year. Illinois Chicago is one of them. It wasn't great for Drake last season, speaking of Coach Henderson, who came on over from South Dakota State, but they've got quite a bit of retention as well. How do you take a look at some of these teams that they were able to have retention? Because I feel like as much as we love to talk about these flashy teams in the transfer portal, what have you, if you're a mid-major team that's able to bring back so many of their guys, look at what Navy did last season, for example. That's just so powerful in this day and age.
Oh, 100%. And especially when you have continuity within a league that has drastically changed. And there's no league that I think has seen a bigger overhaul this past offseason than the WCC, right? I mean, Gonzaga jumped ship, Randy Bennett jumped ship, and it just kind of feels like all of a sudden, for the first time in a long time, we know it's not going to be Gonzaga, but who knows if it's going to be St. Mary's even as well. And so who does that open the door for? Maybe the team that almost knocked off Kentucky, and they would have knocked off Kentucky if it weren't for a half-court shot from Otega Oweh. That's Herb Sendek and Santa Clara. And we know that when it comes to Santa Clara, it's never really been a talent accrual issue at this school. They're in a very great recruiting hotbed. And on top of that, it's just a beautiful campus, a lot of resources comparatively to the rest of the conference. I think ultimately, when you look at it, that continuity on the coaching front, sometimes that matters more than anything because you know you can drive a steady ship when you are constantly seeing a number of different faces come through your program. And so when you look at the roster talent and the absence of Gonzaga, the different changes at St. Mary's, I tend to think that looking at a team like that in one of these leagues that's seen a ton of shakeup, the Mountain West is going to be included in this kind of equation. That's going to really be the spots that I'm going to target right out the gate, because new hierarchies need to be established. And I think, again, leaning on the coaches that we know their track record, that's where I want to start with these leagues.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you mentioned the Mountain West as well, because we know that Hawaii now enters into the Mountain West as well. How do you think they might fare? Because Hawaii's obviously been in the Mountain West for a very long time on the football side of things. They've been in the Big West in terms of basketball for the longest of time, but I felt like they had one of the best off seasons of really any of these mid-majors, picking up a guy like a Marcus Adam, who was a 16-point per game guy 2 seasons ago over at CSUN. They bring back Big Fish Johnson, and I know that it's going to be a big step up in competition. They're a team that I think is going to be able to take that step up, and having that unique home court advantage out there on the island, I think is going to pay dividends right away.
100%. I think the Mountain West is, despite them losing some of their top end programs, they are retaining some really incredible coaching. They're adding in some incredible coaching. And even though this isn't a new move, but it's a recent move, Bryce Drew and Grand Canyon are now in the driver's seat to potentially, again, establish a hierarchy of dominance on the top of a conference. And you nailed it with the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, Aaron Gannott. I think he's going to be right there and have this program where it's always been. I think he's been there for like a decade, if not more at this point. And every single year, it feels like Hawaii is formidable, whether they're on the island or not. And so I tend to think that's going to kind of stay pat. Steve Alford has kind of always been just a random wild card when it comes to just his teams in general. Eric Olin in year 2 at New Mexico, obviously a program with a ton of resources, a great home court environment, and a guy that saw, the UCSD Tritons come from pretty much obscurity, Division II, to making the NCAA tournament under his tutelage. And so I think when you look across the board here, even Sundance, Wixet, Wyoming, again, the Mountain West is in a great spot, and largely it's because of the coaching that still remains continuous and established. And I'm very excited to watch this basketball on a night-to-night basis. I tend to think it's just like the Big West or, the WAC over the years, just a step up in a lot of different regards. And I'm excited about that basketball watching personally.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the Mountain West, even though you're losing so many of those teams like San Diego State, what have you, it's still going to be rock solid. And speaking of losing the likes of San Diego State, what have you, what are your expectations for the Pac-12 for this upcoming season? Because I think that's going to be one of the most interesting conferences in the country, with Gonzaga now playing a very much souped-up schedule. You've got so many of the, shall we say, mainstays of the Mountain West for a long time. Colorado State, Boise State, they're all going to be in there. And then for Oregon State, they undergo a coaching change in the offseason, and I'm not sure about you, but I look at that transfer portal haul, and holy crud, Oregon State is going to be really good down low.
The Pac-12 is going to be great because it's a very condensed league full of really talented coaches who, if you want to see adjustments be made game to game, look no further, right? Because not only are you getting the fun kind of re-rivalry of, well, this isn't even a rivalry. This might be a first-time occurrence in my mind that this has kind of happened, but Ben Jacobson knocked off Kansas back in the day, and the guy who knocked off Kansas basically single-handedly for Northern Iowa back in the day as the 9 seed taking over the 1 was Ali Farokhmanesh, and now they're coaching against each other in the new Pac-12. I don't think that was on a lot of people's bingo cards. Ali Farokhmanesh coaching at Colorado State, Ben Jacobson not coaching at Northern Iowa, and also coaching in the Pac-12 for Utah State. Again, when you're kind of looking at that dynamic, that's fun. But also 2 really good coaches, in my opinion. Ali Farokhmanesh really impressed me last season as a first-time head coach. And then you also look at Brian Dutcher. I think one of the top 10 best coaches in the entire sport, in my opinion, is Brian Dutcher. And so add in Mark Few, add in Leon Rice, and all of a sudden you have a Pac-12 dynamic at play that, oh boy, buckle up, because this is going to be a multi-bid league. This is legitimate basketball being played on an every given night basis. And as they're kind of getting established and they don't have the true credibility of a lot of these high majors right out the gate, take their spreads, take their money lines against some teams from other high major conferences. And I guarantee you it's going to pay dividends in the early goings while teams don't really have true respect, or bettors rather, don't really have true respect for the Pac-12 at large. So that's my approach coming into the year. I'm going to be heavily backing the Pac-12 teams early, and hopefully those guys that have been long-term pat and great in this sport continue to do so for me.
Yep, right there with you. And I think that we've got ourselves just a lot to dive in on in general. We've got a lot of fun, exciting mid-majors. And Rob, you're doing a great job being able to stay up with it all. You do an incredible job this time of year with your baseball bets and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking college ball with you. And I just got so excited today, talking about all the different matchups that we're going to be expecting to see in November, December, January of 2027. So far away still. But for those who are wanting to follow my college basketball bets, once we are in the season, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Absolutely. Rob does such an incredible job looking at the sport of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. Every single time he joins me, lots such great insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, the does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We are wearing very, very thin in terms of the news and notes in college basketball. We've got a few international guys, like we saw Boris Tisma. He was committing to Washington yesterday, a 24-year-old from Croatia who's shooting like 40% for three at 6'9". So certainly I'm keeping my eyes there, but that's a transfer portal at this point. Relatively dead in college basketball, so please do send in those Twitter/X questions. We are now in full-on conference preview mode as well in terms of college basketball. We've already got 3 in the books, and you're going to be getting one of those for every single conference out there in college basketball. And then once we get in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I want this offseason to be able to build for the greatest college basketball season ever and then make a lot of money during the season. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.